Today we're talking about some brand new Xbox Scarlett specs as well as the very first confirmed third-party Xbox Scarlett game. Let's get into it. What is going on, guys? This is Dealer here, back again with yet another video talking about a few different things today. But hey, before I do, because I only get to talk to you a few times a week, I want to let channel members and patrons know that there is now an RDX Discord where you can chat with myself as well as the rest of the RDX panel, all kinds of different associates, friends of the show, and most importantly, each other. This is a great place to game. It's a great place to hang out. We got a text and voice lobby. You can jump in there, grab a microphone, have a conversation, join a game, have a friend. So I want to throw that out there. If you are a YouTube member, it'll be in the community section. If you are a patron, it's one of my last posts. Go there, click that, join now. What? Not a member? Join today for those benefits and so much more. Patron and member link down below. But hey, I'm digressing. I do that occasionally. Let's get into the topics at hand. Techland, the studio known for Dying Light, Dead Island, and most recently Dying Light 2, confirms that Dying Light 2 is a cross-generation game. In fact, they say that has been the plan all along. In a recent interview with WCC Tech, Techland's technology officer, say that 3 times, revealed that the game has been designed from the very start to be a cross-generation title. He says Techland has always had an eye on the latest new toys. To be more specific, yes, the plan since the beginning of production has been to make Dying Light 2 a cross-generation title. Now, of course, we got a lot to talk about in this video, but I want to go over this real quick. This is actually really interesting. To my knowledge, it is the first third-party game that is actually confirmed for the next Xbox. And they're really transparent about this, saying that from the beginning, we are building this game to scale across the more powerful hardware. Now, Techland have already confirmed that they are looking into getting the Xbox One X version to run at 60 FPS, but something tells me this is going to be a hard feat to accomplish. Given the game's open-world nature and high AI count, tons of zombies in the road, all kinds of advanced features in the graphics engine, it's a looker, and it's really hard to get a game like that to look as good as it does while also running at 60 FPS on current generation systems. It's just something that's proven to be very difficult for developers. So what can you expect when the Xbox Scarlett releases and you get that update to your system? Well, likely 60 FPS locked across the board. That would be really nice. In addition to some of the best looking graphics you've probably seen in your life. This game is going to look insane on PC, and I would really think that this is going to look really good on the next generation consoles as well. So you're definitely looking at probably twice the frame rate of something like the Xbox One X on top of much more resolution and more advanced graphical features. This game is going to be a looker. In fact, expect it to look much like this trailer. If you like what you see, this is probably what you can expect at double the frame rate. That's good news to me. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let's move on. Another week, another Project Scarlett dev kit leak. This one comes from Pastebin, and of course we're gonna have people already writing these off, but keep in mind there were so many that did that when these leaks said that the next Xbox was going to have ray tracing. Also, I'm told by a very reliable source that there's information in this document on the screen right now that no average Joe would just happen to put in here, meaning somebody knows what they're doing, aka it is an extremely good fake, or there's some kind of validity here. And you know what? I'm leaning more towards validity. I get a ton of requests to cover every single one of these spec leaks, quote unquote, and this one seems a little bit more legit in a lot of areas than some of the other ones that I've seen. So I've decided to go ahead and cover it. There's a lot that's actually quite fascinating about this. Let me know your thoughts as we move along. So as we've talked about before, and as I've talked about every single time I speak on these leaks, I am not saying these are real. I've never said any of these leaks are real, only given my assessment of what I've seen. So let's go ahead and dive into this. The first listing will be that of the dev kit, and then we'll follow that up with the retail spec as well. Now, for starters, he actually is calling it the right thing. The dev kit is codenamed Danta, which is good. At least he can read, right? So let's get into the hardware. They are referencing the Anubis SoC system on chip, the CPU, a custom Zen 2 8 cores, 16 threads at 3.4 gigahertz. It does reference DXR, which is DirectX ray tracing. And again, what's really interesting here, aside from the thread thread count, which we will get to, is the fact that it does reference Havoc instructions integrated into the chip. This is what I've been talking about. Advanced physics processing brought to you by hardware acceleration. Again, if this is real, this will change the way you perceive games. No console has come close to hardware accelerating physics like this, and that alone makes me very, very excited. I want to see this happen. Physics change the game, and I will link my video on this down below. Now, something else that's very interesting is 8 cores, 16 threads. Again, they are referencing multi-threading here on these consoles, meaning you've only got 8 cores, but again, each core kind of acting like 2, handling 2 different tasks simultaneously. Long story short, 8 Zen 2 powered cores would be more than enough for these systems to game very proficiently next generation, but if they add these 8 virtual cores, that is ridiculous and a good sign. They are really thinking ahead. Not only will these consoles last a very long time, but you will see some crazy CPU driven tasks in these games. I'm all for it, and I'm not exactly sure it would really cost them much extra to actually add these threads. Maybe some of you can comment on that down below. Again, the CPU is one of the major stories behind the system, quantum leap from what we have today. You're talking about games with 120 FPS, as silly as that may sound to some of you. You're talking about advanced physics. You're talking about crazy destruction. You're talking about better AI. You're talking about better simulation. You're talking about better geometry, more objects, more detail. This is big. But hey, let's go ahead and move on to the GPU of the system. It says custom Navi 21 full 56 compute units at 1623 megahertz. Now, for reference, the Xbox One X's GPU is running at 1173 megahertz. So not only is this architecture more efficient, better in every single way over something like Polaris, but there are also more compute units according to this, and it runs at a higher clock. You are looking at something drastically more powerful than the Xbox One X. Now, interestingly, it attempts to give us some specs on the ray tracing aspect of the next Xbox. So per compute unit on this GPU, there is actually 1 dedicated ray tracing core, meaning there are 56 RT cores here. These special ray tracing cores would be tasked with ray tracing, of course, and would be custom designed to handle ray tracing and nothing but. This would take a lot of load off of the GPU in total, hopefully making this whole thing much more smooth. Now, here's the really interesting thing about the RAM of the dev kits. This is not the first time we have heard 48 gigabytes of GDDR6 on the dev kit of this thing. I know that seems absolutely absurd, but keep in mind the dev kit RAM is usually double the production unit. For instance, the Xbox One X dev kit had 24 gigs of GDDR5. It would be very interesting to see how they are going to merge their memory pool with the SSD of the system. Maybe that has something to do with it. Speaking of SSD, it says it has a 1TB plus 4TB SSD NVMe. This is the new PCI Express 4.0, double the bandwidth of PCI Express 3.0. And remember, Microsoft themselves have talked about this flexible VRAM, this pool of memory that will help all games load much faster, hopefully no matter what kind of external device they are installed on. Now, if you notice when referencing the storage, it says flexible dedicated VRAM. It says here that it starts with 32 gigabytes and it goes up to 64 gigabytes. Now, some of you may be confused. Why is this on the storage section of this listing? Well, that's because that's how much of the SSD that's actually used to hold all of your games can be used to cache parts of the game that you are playing currently. So think of it as a partition. Anywhere from 32 to 64 gigabytes can be reserved on your hard drive to service load times of any game you are currently playing. At least that's my theory. I talked about this quite a while ago. I did talk about how I thought this might be the way they would speed up all games regardless of what kind of device they are installed on. There are other benefits as well, but it's looking like they're going to use some kind of partition to aid that massive amount of RAM the system has. So again, when all of the dedicated video memory on the APU is used, that's 24 gigabytes, it will spill out into this partition, and when that stuff is needed, it will shoot it back into the RAM. And because the SSD is so fast, the penalties will be pretty low. Let me know what you think about that down below. Audio chip custom hi-fi DSP. It says it has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, 4 USB-C ports, which is a really good piece of news here if this is true. USB-C is much faster than the USB 3 that the current Xbox One X uses. This means fast charging, more bandwidth for accessories, and more. Let me know how you think they might use this down below. It says it has 2 USB-A, 2 RJ-45, 1 S-PDIF, or SPIDIF as some call it, one IRC, and of course it does say it's using DirectX 12, DXR as we covered before, and DirectX ML. Now interestingly, it says all of this runs on a 275 watt PSU. This is a 275 watt power supply. The Xbox One X runs on a 245 watt power supply. So with this much more power, this much more capability, hyper-threading, probably twice as fast on the GPU, all of this memory, all of these things going on, ray tracing, etc. The dev kit only consumes a little bit more power than the Xbox One X itself. That's pretty impressive. It does clarify that the Scarlett is of course targeting performance. This is one of the ways the Scarlett differentiates itself from its 2013 brethren. The original Xbox One was not targeting performance first and foremost. So in 2013 you didn't even get all of the performance you could possibly have at the time for $500. Something like Project Scarlett is shooting for the most performance possible for around the $500 marker. You are looking at a different approach, a different monster here. Now when it comes to the retail unit, this listing does tell us that there are some differences between that and the dev kit itself. Again, you're talking about the Anubis SoC. Some of you may be wondering why the chip is actually so big considering it is now a 7nm architecture, 393 square millimeters in fact. Well, I'd speculate that that's because of the addition of those ray tracing cores as well as perhaps other custom hardware. All of this stuff takes up space on the silicon, so they could have some custom additions there that are really taking up some of that room. Again, if they got these Havoc instructions built into the chip, built into the silicon itself, that would take up space. But if they go the route of letting ray tracing cores multitask or multifunction, meaning they'll be able to ray trace on one side, but if a developer chooses, they can allocate some of them to physics. Then of course you don't have to take up that extra space. These would be multi-function ray tracing cores, something completely custom. But hey, I'm just throwing that out there. It could be a possibility. Now that's the total size of the chip itself. But what about the CPU? Well, it retains all 16 threads, which is really good news. They didn't chop that in half. The GPU actually did lose some compute units as stated before. We're down to 52. So that leaves us with 52 ray tracing cores. And as talked about before, the RAM was indeed halved. So you got 24 gigabytes of GDDR6. Says here 12 Samsung 2GB chips. It does say that 4 gigabytes of this would be used for the operating system of the console. Today, something like the Xbox One X uses 3 gigabytes for the operating system, so that's not far off at all. So there's a little sneak peek, a little tidbit for those that are still listening. After E3, I was informed by someone that is directly involved with the project that the Project Scarlett will have a custom memory solution that is not available on PC at this time. You cannot get this memory set up on a PC today. Now, when he told me that, I wasn't exactly sure what he meant, but then I started seeing some crazy amounts of RAM on some of these system spec sheets that I'm seeing behind the scenes, while at the same time those same sheets talking about custom caches of memory on the SSD of the system itself that will work in tandem with the system's effective VRAM as well. So if you got 24 gigabytes on the console, 4 of that is reserved for the OS, you got 20 gigabytes left. You add the virtual memory pool of the SSD, that custom partition I spoke about earlier, anywhere from 32 to 64 gigabytes, and you have got at the maximum nearly 100 gigabytes of RAM for games. This does include the virtual pool. This is an insane memory setup, and while you may be able to try to emulate something like this in a crazy PC, to my knowledge it's not exactly possible like this. Given the fact that these consoles share memory on the CPU and GPU end, all of this stuff is probably going to be very, very hard to replicate. But hey, this is just me spitballing, just like ray tracing, which actually turned out to be true, just like hardware accelerated physics, which I really hope is true. This memory setup is also just a theory of mine, something that is very intriguing to me. Let me know your thoughts on that down below. Now, when it comes to the hard drive in the production unit, the retail unit, it is a 1TB NVMe SSD that is PCI Express 4.0. Once again, that is double the bandwidth of PCI Express 3.0, which could really come into play with this whole memory setup I've talked about. Again, talking about that flexible VRAM memory. The production unit will have the 2 HDMI ports, the 2 USB Thunderbolt ports, and of course the 2 USB-A ports. The I/O is pretty much intact, and of course the production unit will run on the same 275 watt power supply. So let me know know what your thoughts are down below. And of course, if you want to support videos like this, you want to support the channel, hit that like button, maybe share this, or definitely share this with as many people as you can. It really helps more than you know. I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. I find the custom memory setup I've been told about extremely interesting. I cannot wait for official information to be revealed about this. I hope the CPU is as beefy as possible. We all want the best system we can get in 2020. We are all consumers after all. Also, let me know how you think this will compare to something like the PlayStation 5. Microsoft have given a little bit more information on their system. Does that bode more confidence? Let me know down below. And hey, if you're new here, maybe hit that subscribe button. For those that want to support the channel, hit that join button or go to the Patreon link down below. You'll get free games, you'll get all kinds of different things, including access to that exclusive RDX Discord where we talk to all kinds of people in gaming. It's a good time. Again, thank you for all you do. I'm Dealer. I'm out.